All right, I got a scenario for you. You just kicked off your raise. You're really excited. You're trying to raise $2 million and you have a conversation, and the investor says, I'm interested in investing. I'd like to put in $2,000. What do you do? In this video, we're talking about all things small checks, when you should take them, when you shouldn't, and how you can actually take a lot of small checks without having any of the downsides like cap table mess and admin overhead. Before we go into the video, a little bit about me. My name is Matt Sherman. I've been in the venture scene for about a decade, been helping companies raise money for about the past 5 years. The biggest thing that I notice when I'm helping companies is a lack of understanding of how the actual game works up in Silicon Valley. So I make these videos to help folks all across the world understand how it works up there so they can enter that world, raise money, and most importantly, build a world-defining company. And on the way to building a world-defining company comes sometimes small checks. So let's get into it. First, let's define what is a small check. Obviously, this is relative. I define a small check for myself, for my last company, as $10,000 or less. So if someone wanted to invest 10 grand or less, then that's a small check. 25 grand for me, that's a lot. But for someone else, for a hard tech company, maybe a small check is 50 grand or less, or 100 grand or less. But the key is that when I say small check, it's checks that are less than you'd rather raise. You'd rather raise more than that amount. Okay. Folks that would be most likely to be the ones to offer small checks are angel investors, not firms, but individual people who want to invest in companies, because $10,000 or $5,000 or even $1,000 is not a trivial amount of money. And to put it into a startup where the chances of it failing are extremely high is difficult for some. So that is why small checks even exist in the first place. But it's up to you as a founder to discern whether you should take a small check or not. So first of all, let's go into why you would want to take a small check for your company. I think the one of the top reasons you'd want to take a small check, $2,000, $5,000, $10,000, etc., is for the value that person could unlock other than that capital. I had an investor in my last company. His name was Francis. He cut us a $2,500 check. It was the smallest check we ever took, and I was hesitant, but we took it. And he was one of the most valuable investors that we had. He made customer introductions, he even made investor introductions, and he made that $2,500 worth so much more by his value add. So I was super glad to be working with him, and I was glad that I let him on the cap table so I can get that non-capital focused help. That's the first thing, is you don't know how helpful someone can be until they're incentivized to be helpful, right? So take someone's check if you think they can make customer intros, investor intros, be good advice or a sounding board for you, etc. Second reason you want to take a check is, yes, you might think, oh, I'm only going to take 50 grand checks or 100K checks. But if you raised nothing so far, you just have raised a few checks, you need momentum. You need to prove to other investors that you have something that other investors are intrigued in. And when you get a new investor, you then can leverage that to tell other investors, hey, I got another investor. Are you interested? The amount matters a little less than the fact that you just got another investor, right? So use the small check to build some momentum. And then when you get a small check, thirdly, get that small check person, say, great, thanks for investing. Now let me, figure out who you can make intros to so we can get larger checks, which goes back to that first point. And then the final point on why you want to take a small check, especially in the beginning, is it just gives you practice engaging with an investor, closing with an investor, getting experience working with an investor. Now, I wouldn't say the same for if you're a repeat founder, you've already raised tens of millions of dollars, but I think a lot of first-time founders think in their head how this works, and it's not usually the reality. So get someone involved, empower them to be on your team, to be helpful to you. Then you'll learn what you like in investors, what you don't, etc. Okay, so those are reasons that you want to take a small check. Okay, and I think those are pretty strong reasons, and I've always been a proponent of small checks, as you can tell through my story. But why wouldn't you want to take a small check? Well, I think the primary reason you wouldn't want to take a small check is because cap table management. If you take $5,000 or $2,000 from 50 people, it's going to be a real pain if you want to sell the company one day, or if you want to shut down the company and you got to get everyone their docs. Of course, you don't want to shut down, but if you have to, the more investors you have on the cap table, the more folks you kind of have to deal with when you need to, right? Versus if you have 5 investors, it's a little easier than 50. So that's one. Two is admin overhead. It kind of relates to number one a little bit, but if you have 50 investors, if at any point you need them to sign for something, you'll need to wrangle all the signatures. You'll need to make sure beforehand that everything's organized. And when you're raising money, it's like hard to be super, super, super organized, especially when you have 50 people on your cap table. Much easier when you have 5 or 10 or 15, right? And then I would say the last, potentially most important reason why you wouldn't want to take a bunch of small checks is because it may signal to future investors that you may not know what you're doing. If you raised $100,000 and that came from 17 investors, all who cut checks between 1 and 5K, it may tell a future investor that you're not sophisticated enough to kind of like do this, or at least from their perspective. And it might be a pass, so it may be a signaling issue. That would kind of suck, right? So those would be the reasons you wouldn't want to take small checks. Of course, let alone like letting someone on your cap table, that's a pain in your arse. Like you don't want that, but that you have to deal with that with the pros and the cons. You don't really know until someone's on the cap table. With all that said, I am a big proponent of small checks. I am a big proponent of if someone wants to be involved in your journey, in your vision, wants to be a part of your company, you should let them be a part of it. So how do you do that though without eliminating the cons? And the answer is actually pretty simple. It's through something called one of two things. One of the things is called an angel list. RUV stands for roll-up vehicle, and the alternative to that is an angel list syndicate. So I'll go to the RUV first. An RUV is a product on Angel List where you essentially get a little link that you can send out to your accredited investors that want to invest small amounts like 1K, 5K, 2.5K, 10K, etc. And you send out this link to all these people, and then they wire money to Angel List, okay, through this link. And then once you're done, once you close the RUV, Angela sends you one check, which is all the money that was invested, and it's one item on your cap table. You can get 10. You can get 15 people investing in your company through an RUV, but it's only one item on your cap table. You get all the pros, you get very few of the cons. It's a really kind of a no-brainer. I did this with Seed Scout for about there was about 5 investors where I raised about $12,000 from all of them, and I didn't have to have 5 extra investors on the cap table. I just had one. It's really great. The alternative, which is a little harder, is what we call a syndicate. If you find a leader of a syndicate, which is essentially a syndicate is a group, it's like a glorified email list of LPs, investors who are looking for deals, and they rely on what we call a syndicate lead to then surface deals that they want to do to the LPs. And when the syndicate lead decides to do a deal, then the LPs have the option to invest in that deal. But it's deal by deal, right? So, LPs don't have to invest in every deal. They can pass on deals, etc. But if you essentially meet an AngelList syndicate lead, or just syndicate lead in general, and they want to invest, they can say, hey, great, we'd like to get $100,000 allocation. And you can say, great. And then they go back to their LPs and they raise money in chunks of 1,000, 5,000, 10,000, 15,000, 7,000, 3,000, and until they get that 100,000 number. Once they get the 100,000 number, they wire the money to you. That syndicate lead is on your cap table, and that's it. They may have 30 LPs in that deal, so you may have 30 extra investors, but it's only one extra line on your cap table. Not a bad deal. Not a bad deal. I think that if you have someone or a group of people that want to be involved in your journey, as long as they're accredited, I think that you absolutely should let them invest. Now, on the cap table, that's one thing, but just getting equity in your company through a syndicate, through an RUV, or directly investing, I think figure out a way to make that happen, okay? So in summary here, small checks are not bad. It's good to have people wanting to give you money to support your vision. That's like a good thing. But you don't want to do it in a way that's going to shoot you in the foot in the future, okay? So keep in mind, make sure everyone that invests, big check or small check, is good. It's not going to be a pain in your arse. Two, make sure everyone that invests, is going to have realistic expectations around what comes with that check. If someone writes a $1,000 check, they're not really gonna get access to you unless you want to spend time with them. But make sure they're realistic, and this goes back to not really being a pain in the arse. And three, be smart. I don't think you should take 20 investors that invest 1K and put them on your cap table. But you should totally put 20 investors that want to invest 1K, put them in an RUV, and then have the RUV on your cap table, right? Be smart. Be sophisticated. This is what future investors look for in founders. Founders that know these mechanics, use them, and then allow that to benefit them to building a great company. So I hope this video was helpful. I have plenty more videos like this on my channel. If you want to learn more about all things raising capital, we have all sorts of stuff on the channel. So go ahead, take a browse. If you like this, you can subscribe, give us an upvote or a thumbs up or whatever it's called, and I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.